That's the angle that I took with it.
Sure. Or you could be like, hey, like Donald Trump, what are you doing? I don't know. Like,
Oh, okay.
you know,
I'd like to shout out the brick wall for scratching my Apple Watch. That's what I'm going to do.
I mean, I'd prefer you stay away from the inanimate objects just because.
I'll do what I want.
I mean, sure. I mean, you know, Zach at one
What
point.
happened?
Come at me, commenters.
Were you vibing and just flailing a little?
Oh, no. I was moving stuff around in here, and I was moving one of the lights back out, and I hit that corner
So
right
you
there.
punched the wall with your hand, and then the watch
With my
took it?
wrist somehow.
What
I don't know
I'm
how.
saying is that
Actually,
he needs to be a bubble boy.
I literally
Bubble
threw
wrap.
this across
That's why I put everything in cases.
a basketball court like 2 days ago, and nothing.
I think it was because it was a brick wall. I'll show you it sometime.
Fair
It's
point.
pretty bad.
Fair point. Okay.
All right. Okay. All right.
Are we doing this?
Radio Lab. No. You remember? You know how the beginning
yeah,
of
of
Radio Lab?
course.
It's like, all right. Okay.
Okay.
All right. That's it. That's
Okay.
all I know.
No, that's great. That's great. Okay, let's do this.
All right. Go. You can talk.
So
This is exactly how every SyrupCast
Yeah,
started
okay,
for like
yeah.
a year
Okay,
and a
great.
half.
Do you guys need help?
No, we don't need help. We got this. Just let us. Just gotta find the beat. Okay. Hawks are in town tonight.
Okay. Let's talk for a second actually about the new collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Let's talk about $207 million for 5 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So it's money. People like money.
That's so much
People
money.
like the NBA right now, man.
It's so much money.
All the football players are getting concussed.
It's true. It makes DeRozan's deal look slightly less charming.
Well, yes, and then it also, if we sign Lowry to a max because he's hitting all the threes in the world right now, feel great about that. There's been a lot of conversation about whether people should be coming right out of college directly into the NBA or there should be like a minimum years. I actually think the solution, with what we've seen with the Raptors 905, is to do something a little bit more like in the NHL. Every NBA team gets a D-League team. It's like their farm team. You can draft them in high school. They can play a little bit, go to school, get an education, and then when they're ready, they get called up. Same way
You think that should be mandatory?
Yeah, because then that way the young people who need money right away don't lose their kind of earning power, but then it's in a structured environment that allows them to develop, and they still might be able to go to school because it's not like the D-League season's like year round.
Right.
And then everybody wins.
I agree.
But we're only talking about this for one reason. There's an elephant in the room. And that's, are they going to trade JV? Because I'm really worried. After that Cleveland game, I went to my girlfriend. I was like, girlfriend, I'm sorry, but your Raptors boyfriend's going to get traded. And it's because no one on the team wants to take advantage of his capabilities. And they are very upset that he can't move his body at NBA speeds.
It's true.
So the clock is ticking.
But his jump shot has improved so much that I think
his haircut his hair game is on fire. Like,
my wife wants to scratch him when he's on the TV. It's unfair.
Just feral.
He's such a
Feral
good
is the word.
It's so good.
Okay. Do you want to talk to Jays at all? Encarnacion? I'm out. I'm out. As soon as the season was like, we had a good 2-year run. It's going to be another 20 years of not being relevant, and they're not going to spend money. And
I think Igor can probably pipe in on this.
Oh man, I mean, I think.
Wait, what's Igor doing here?
I know what.
Who's this guy?
Dear listeners,
We're being recorded. I don't think there's any way to hide
this is not
it.
a time warp. Yes. So I think for the Jays, they need to go either one way or the other. Either tear it down totally, trade
Would you tear
Donaldson
it down a team
because
that went to the ALDS
because-
CS twice in 2 years?
because the Boston Red Sox are probably like more than a 90-win team right now. The Yankees always have amazing.
So compete. We're like the third biggest city in.
Yeah, I mean, but they have to decide. It's either tear it down completely or invest in the team and sign Encarnacion, right?
We'll take all the Rogers 1 number money that they've saved and shove it right back into that guy's contract.
So you can actually go over the cap and just
There is
pay
no
the
cap.
fine,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Yeah.
just the
Luxury tax.
in
Luxury tax,
in
yeah.
Major League Baseball, the reason why the player salaries are so huge is that there's no artificial restriction on that stuff.
It's not.
So it's just
communism.
like their unwillingness to pay people at certain amounts.
There's no cap at all.
There's no cap at all.
Zero.
Yeah.
Because he's got a few good years left. I mean, he's a slugger, right? So he can go
Yeah.
he can go to 40 if he needs
Yeah,
to.
you could go straight DH.
Mm.
I'm just saying we had a good 2-year run for all the people who go train into the city, and now it's time to support basketball and footy.
I agree.
That's
Oh, that game. Oh, that game was so hard to watch. I felt bad. I did feel kind of bad for them watching, like being outside in that weather and having to. Although watching the Sounders run through the field victorious and nobody in the stands gave a damn. You know, they were just like everybody was just silent except for like the 40 people from 200s who were just like, yes.
But if you miss 2 penalty kicks,
I know it's embarrassing. It's true. It's embarrassing.
But also, I mean, what I hate about soccer is that why is
you
the
can
most
just leave,
important.
you can just leave that sentence alone. What I hate about soccer is soccer. I'm joking. I love soccer.
But like, why must a championship game be decided with penalty kicks?
because they're incentivized to not try and score. Half that match was like TFC guy gets it, runs up, Seattle player falls over, Seattle gets the ball. Seattle player runs up, TFC player falls over, gets the ball. It was like the worst game of Pong, and then they had to go to penalty kicks. Now also it's like minus whatever degree weather, and it's terrible. So I wouldn't want to be running on natural grass in that either. But it's because it's not the perfect game. It's the beautiful game.
But it's not
the perfect game.
And they're not getting paid nearly as much as.
No, they actually
the
had
other
to
2
shovel the
leagues.
field off before the start for extra cash.
Yeah.
Home hardware.
It's hard. It sucks. It's like cricket.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, welcome to the SyrupCast. It is a very special episode.
Are we on a podcast? Are we podcasting right now? Is that what we've been doing?
Yes, we've been recording you this whole time.
Oh man.
Yes.
Hope I sound smart.
I want to go back to my Encarnacion take and redo it.
Next time, maybe.
Okay.
Episode 200.
Yeah,
200.
All right. I'll be ready.
If you've been a longtime listener to this podcast, you obviously recognize those voices. But just for new listeners, could you two please introduce yourselves?
OG Pod, son.
Okay.
We started this thing.
That you did.
We did.
We had a need to pod.
Mm-hmm.
We pod at a quarter mile at a time.
And for 2 years.
Yeah.
at a time.
Deepest explanation.
On video too. Usually more than audio because we could never sync the audio tracks
It's true.
because things crash a lot. MacBook Air is not the best for multimedia.
Who knew?
As we record this podcast
Yes,
with a MacBook
on
Air.
on a smaller, less capable MacBook Air.
Do you want to actually say your name?
I am Douglas Soltys.
He is the managing editor of BetaKit, our sister site. And we are very honored to have Sir
Daniel Bader.
and Daniel. I mean, obviously, people that know you.
I am a dog lover.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about it. No, I work. I used to
Sweaters
work.
in the streets, dogs in the sheets.
I was hoping you'd bring your dog
Yeah,
today.
what the hell, man?
Where's the dog?
we
My
were
dog-
all hoping.
You dropped.
That's the only reason I got the invite. I understand. My dog is 12 weeks old, so she can't really go places yet.
Is she as soft as she looks?
She's amazing. She's amazingly soft.
Beautiful.
She's a
dog.
Great Dane or Great Dane mix?
A Great Dane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God! So that dog's gonna get like 12 feet tall,
It is.
like the Great
already-
Dane, like the one that.
It's already 30. She's already 33 pounds.
Oh my
and she's
God.
12 weeks old.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Holiday weight.
We got her.
Does she have like her own room? Does she have her own room in your house?
She basically owns the house. She learned how to climb stairs last Saturday,
Classic.
and it's all over.
Oh.
So
She still
Stair
owning
climbing.
the neighbor's front door.
she is she only takes. Okay, so when it snowed, she doesn't like the feeling of the snow on her paws. So now she just runs to my neighbor's front steps, does her thing, and then runs back to our house. It's
That's
so
so cute.
funny.
That's great.
But she doesn't give me time to pick it up, so I often have to bring her back inside, clean her paws.
And then you're just a random guy
Yeah.
hunting for poop
And-
on the streets.
I have to go back outside by myself.
I just love poop.
Just leave it there. Pretend it's a present for your neighbors.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank
it's
you for
It's an
coming.
honor to be back, and this is amazing. We were so we were so lo-fi compared to this.
We had good intentions. It just never. There's a lot of crashing.
We did have a lot of crashing, and then we figured that out. But then we were just at the mercy of the internet. You know, we had our
Bandwidth.
our
Yeah.
home setups. You often
My
know
personal internet was the worst.
your travails on finding a place in your apartment to podcast that was comfortable for your back took about 12 weeks.
Comfortable for my back, but then there's because
And your
the
cats.
barber shop below me would be
Right.
bouncing block rock and beats.
Yes.
So I had to move to the very furthest corner of my apartment and just edge up into it But then also like record at a specific height because I was no furniture I could bring there because it was our bedroom. So I'd be like podcasting off the bed mattress and then trying to find a chair. Yeah, it was I basically was just squat potting for a good hour and a half. Yeah, it was great. And then we'd be like, oh, and then it crashed and we just lost the audio. So we could have just done that a different way. But it was the early days of pod. We were on ready.
And you guys, laid the groundwork. Obviously, we wouldn't be here had you guys not, developed the following for the pod. And
certainly that's where the alcoholism started.
Certainly
Whiskey.
And speaking of alcoholism, we tried very hard to get Jane on the pod, but alas, we could not. Just the schedule didn't work. So
she had to go back to her home planet.
Yes.
She better drop a comment on this thing.
Yeah. Please keep Jane in your thoughts.
Just
her
one
ghost
comment.
She's still alive.
It's true.
Please be.
She didn't die on the way to her home planet. She just went back. But no, we should, for the 4 people who were listening to the podcast back then who are still listening to it now, I hope you're losing your minds over this. And then you're gonna put a lot of positive comments in the streams to educate people on what we've been talking about for maybe the past 24 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think positive comments exist on YouTube.
Oh no, YouTube commenters come at me. I'm talking about the MobileSyrup commenters. Yeah. All the dankest memes just right up in the comments. I don't even care.
So Daniel,
yes.
So have you said everything you've wanted to say, Doug?
Yeah, we're podding.
Okay,
we're
perfect.
full pod mode engaged, man.
Yeah.
Pod mode engaged. Okay, so
we should have done a training seminar.
I know. Anyway, so if you've been following along this week, I guess the most exciting announcement in some respect was the kind of launch of RCS, Rich Communication System, on the Rogers and Fido network. Daniel, you wrote a really great editorial on RCS on Android Central ahead of the launch. This was, obviously Android Central is an American-focused site, and so you were talking within the context of the U.S., specifically Sprint. But for those who don't know, and RCS is, I think the majority don't know what it is. Can you kind of give us a technological backgrounder for everyone?
Yeah, so RCS is basically iMessage for everybody else. And the way it works is that over the last few years, networks have moved to an all-data backend core, it's called IMS. Mm-hmm. And the way it works is that traditionally when you send a text message, it goes over 3G, and there's not a whole lot of bandwidth that you have to work with. So you can't really send high resolution photos and video. You are constrained by the legacy technology when it comes to group messages, things like that. And there's nothing real time. So you send something and it's asynchronous. So you send it, the person gets it, they send something back, and then you get the response. It's you know what a text message is. RCS takes that to the next level. So it uses the same foundation, but it adds things that we like from WhatsApp and iMessage and WeChat and everything else. It allows you to create a platform. So the first iteration of that is type indicators.
Mm-hmm.
BBM made that famous. Douglas is typing. It's the thing that you expect.
One might call this BBM 2.0.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to call it that. You get delivery receipts. You get high resolution video and tech video and photo sharing, and
no more MMS. Someone sent you a high resolution image.
Yeah, and it's like 60 kilobytes, and you're like, oh, sorry. We're like, what the hell is that? And then finally, you get actual group chat that works across dozens of people, and you don't have to finagle with it. You don't have to use a certain client. So it's not as big a deal yet as say a brand new platform. But what this is doing is Google is working with the GSMA, which is the standards body that makes all of these cool new things happen, and they're trying to work with all the carriers around the world, especially those in the US, to make RCS a thing. Mm-hmm. And RCS is the only way that if you're using whatever Android phone on whatever network, you will be able to take advantage of all these cool chat features. Mm-hmm. Now, I recognize that this is a very long-term thing, and I was a little bit I was a little bit hyperbolic perhaps in my words, but I do think that this is a very exciting venture because it allows it basically is the only way that you can integrate iMessage-like features into a legacy platform like texting, and without having to force people to download something new.
All right. So the direction I want to kind of lead this conversation is that there are certain caveats with this system as it exists right now. And is that something you can touch upon? Obviously, like as I said in our podcast notes, I said, a lot of stars have to align for you as a consumer or user of one of these phones to actually see the benefits of RCS. So can you just outline that?
Yeah, you have to have the right carrier. You have to have the right messaging application. And right now that is just Google Messenger for Android. And you have to be on LTE. And all those things have to be there before you can take advantage of this. You also have to be talking to somebody who's also hitting those same check marks. So for most people right now in North America, you have two choices. You have Sprint and Rogers, and you have to be on Android, and you have to be using Google Messenger. So that's really, it's very few people. But
what's the check down process if you're not on that? Does it just revert to classic?
It just reverts to SMS, and that's the beauty, in my opinion, is that it just falls back to the lowest common denominator, and I love iMessage for that reason, is that if it's blue, it's because both people meet those marks. And if it's not blue, if it's the dreaded green, then it just works.
Just pinch your nose and move on.
Exactly. You're ostracized, but you get the job done. So that's what I like about this. So
What if you send like a message from iMessage to someone who's on Rogers, where rich text is working? Are they going to see like the emoji or whatever fancy animation they're sending?
No, and that's the problem.
Okay.
And this is the elephant in the room, because Apple can and may eventually integrate this type of technology into iOS, but they really have no incentive to do that.
So they have to flip a switch as well for that to work. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the other thing, is that iMessage has moved so far beyond just read receipts and higher resolution images that they could easily integrate RCS down the road and not lose any customer loyalty, right? Because it would still be a green bubble and people would still feel ashamed of the green bubble, but at least it would work better.
What's the number one feature of iMessage that are keeping people locked into iMessage? Is it the group chat, or is it like they've added new features, but are any of those features that would keep
people tell me to read receipts all the time?
I feel like it just works, right?
Yeah, first thing I turn off.
Yes, I turn that off too.
Absolutely.
Well, I think for anybody who switches phones a lot, turning iMessage off is a good idea,
Yes.
because once it gets your phone number, it eats it, and it eats it forever. So that's one thing. But yeah, iMessage just works, and it's awesome. Oh, that was good.
Good job.
That's impressive.
I think I broke a rib.
On the video.
That also happened once.
Yeah.
You podcast right after breaking a rib, and you were like,
I was really drunk and in a
How
lot of
did
pain.
you break a rib?
I think I was sportsing.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
sports.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
it was the next day
Basketball, I
after.
remember
Yeah.
Basketballing.
So former Mobile Nations writer Dieter Bohn, now at The Verge, he tweeted out your.
Dieter Bohn's still alive? He didn't go back to his home planet?
He didn't. I know. right?
Everyone's going back to their home planets.
That's weird.
for Christmas.
Times have changed, man.
I know. But war never changes. Anyway, so he tweeted, he had somewhat of a negative take, which was like, hey, like this is the epitome of or the epitome of Stockholm syndrome, technological Stockholm syndrome, I believe was his wording.
Yeah.
Where do you think he's coming from? And I specifically just want to raise that just because I think it kind of helps us unpack some of the issues with this platform going, or it's not a platform as you would say, it's a standard going forward.
Yeah, so he's not wrong, and I don't disagree with him at all. What I think he's raising is that we have to rely on the carriers, who are extremely unreliable and very prone to disappointing us. And that's the problem. Is Google has an incentive, because while it pushes Allo on one hand as a competitor to WhatsApp and WeChat and all the other proprietary chat applications, it also wants something that just works, like iMessage, so that you can turn on an Android phone for the first time and be able to claim that you have a true iMessage competitor that's not Allo, because Allo is used by 0 people. So that's what I find so enticing about it. But he raises a really good point. We should not have to rely on the intervention of the carriers, especially knowing how badly how bad their reputations are when it comes to things like updates and keeping up standards, and the fact that they have business incentives to. And right now, Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile all have their own versions of RCS on their networks, and they've
The first bloatware sticker package that they push to your phone without you wanting it, I think, will cause a riot. Right. Like it opens up all the things that you don't like the carriers doing to your phone that you just kind of want that stock experience. Now imagine that being in your core messaging system.
You don't want Rogers stickers? You don't want to send those to your friends?
No.
but they own Encarnacion's likeness.
Yeah.
For now. Actually, they don't. He's a free agent. They don't own crap.
No, you're right.
So
Batista, though.
I don't know if you can really comment on this, but I think what's important to keep in mind with iMessage is that it kind of comes out of it came out of a very specific American context, in the sense that like the carrier situation was a lot different in the US at that time when iMessage came out, and it was seen as this very like useful app in that situation, right? With how the carriers like the kind of the texting situation that was there, whereas opposed to Canada, it was kind of, it wasn't, I think, it was received positively, but not necessarily seen as this like oh God, thank God for this app, right? And so how does RCS fit within that ecosystem of the US?
Well, the US was and still is very divided when it comes to network technology. It still relies on CDMA, on Sprint and Verizon. Everybody's moving to LTE and eventually 5G. And I think what was interesting about the proliferation of iMessage was just that the iPhone took off in the US in a way that it didn't in any other country, because
Carrier by carrier.
Well, carrier by carrier, but also at the time, carriers had so much control over what you saw and were able to do on your phone. And Apple basically took that and turned it on its head by saying, you're never going to mess with my phone. What they did was so low key, was that they took this thing that was so important to the carrier, being the phone number, and they basically they created an entirely different database out of it. And they used that existing means of authentication and identification and just co-opted it for what some people in the open source community, especially on Android, say was for evil. But for people using iMessage and people who rely on iMessage, it was a great triumph and something that will go down as one of the best and most subtle over the top service integrations ever on mobile. And it did pave the way to some extent. I mean, at the time, you look at something like WhatsApp that had a different direction. It built it used the phone number, and it still does as a means of identification, but it did so in many developing markets because it was so easy to start, and because it uses so little bandwidth. iMessage did the same thing. It just was already there, and I love that about it. So I would love that on Android, but Android will never be that because there's Samsung and LG and HTC and every other OEM that also wants a stake in it.
OEMs and carriers in that scenario.
So
right?
I guess the question I want to put to you guys is, I think the requirement that it needs to be Google Messenger is interesting in the sense of kind of Google's bigger messaging ecosystem, and we'll talk about that. But specifically, like, I think a really big kind of what will be a kind of a speed bump to this is that it's Google Messenger, right?
For now,
right?
So next year, in release 2 of what's called the Universal Standard under the GSMA, they will be releasing an API that allows any app developer with a messaging app to integrate RCS into this universal standard RCS into its application. So if you like Textra or Chomp or whatever messaging app you prefer, you'll be able to get this as long as the developer supports it.
Messages into the same message in 2 places?
No, because Android forces you to choose a default texting app.
So it would work with stuff like WhatsApp and...
No. Well, WhatsApp is always going to be its own thing.
Okay.
But on Android, that doesn't really matter.
Oh, so you mean like messaging
So if you
clients?
use
Okay.
like
Okay, I get it now. Yeah.
So that's great because like for most people, I think their messaging client is just the one that comes with their phone, right? So if you have a Samsung phone, whatever,
That's what I was gonna say.
No, but even then, it's still the one that you choose that comes with your phone. Any Android phone you're kind of like buying off the rack is going to come with 2 or 3 options of like, crap, I got to choose.
But think about it.
Contacts,
Rogers and Sprint have committed to bundling Google Messenger as the default app on every Android phone they sell, which means that Samsung and LG and HTC and every other company is being forced to change the default texting app carrier by carrier, which is so interesting because it's taking the OEM out of the equation here. And that's fascinating to me because for so long the OEM was the strongest player in the conversation when it came to carriers.
It still is. It's just the OEM is now Google.
To some extent, yeah.
So,
I mean, Google Messenger is already integrated on the Pixel, so.
when do you foresee TELUS and Bell hopping on to this? Obviously, because I mean,
in about 2 weeks.
in 2 weeks. Okay. Well,
No, I don't know. I think honestly, it's been very interesting watching what's going on in Canada just from a technology perspective. The fact that VoLTE, for example, is still Alberta and BC only on TELUS, things like that. It's still a pilot. It's very strange to see the priorities that the Canadian carriers take to get to the same place, because they all reach that place eventually. It's just some of them decide to do things earlier.
Question for, I guess, I'd like for you, Doug, and you, Pat, kind of to start on this, and then Daniel, you can chip in. How do you see this like affecting now Google's, or what is kind of Google's now position with its messaging apps, right? Because it has
what is Google's position between Google, the Android platform director, and Google, the Android hardware manufacturer? I think
There's so many messaging apps too, right? Like you have GChat, Hangouts is what it's called. I always still call it GChat. That's still around, right? Like I use that all the time because I have friends that use it. And then there's like Allo, and there's so many. I think at some point they need to compress things into 1 or 2 apps because there's too many that people can choose from right now. Too disparate.
Well, I think the organization has to come within Google/Alphabet first before you ever see that. But the whole problem with this, or the dysfunction, comes from you're herding cats in a knife fight, and that's always been the.
You always have the best analogies.
Well, it's the counterbalancing factor between
cats in a knife fight.
like the single player solution and then the ecosystem play, which has, as we've seen in the past year, the dynamics in Android have shifted significantly with what's happened to Samsung and what Google is trying to do, and then the carrier relationships changing to that. So it's that phase 2 rollout, the groundswell that needs to happen to get this to be the de facto platform instead of the baseline protocol standard that everyone uses is a lot of work. And then meanwhile, Apple just needs to add like one feature at a time and keep iterating. I do think that if there's a shrinking between the baseline capabilities of this versus what Apple is offering, you might see some transfer over. But how much of actually is this tied to carrier updates or like being pushed through that way, and like versions of Android or anything like that? Because there's like the OS fragmentation factor into this in any way, or is it more just
It does not, right?
No, I mean you do have to have a version of Android that will run the latest version of Messenger, which I think is
4.4.
Yeah, like I think this applies to like 80% of the Android market right now.
okay?
And you're right. Google is in a tough spot because it's both an OEM and it creates the platform on the other side. And we've seen with the Pixel that it's willing to offer exclusive features. But to this, I think this is Google at its most altruistic. It's selfish because it still wants to control it by using a company, Jibe, that it bought in order to facilitate the cloud rollout aspect of this. But there is a universality to this this project that Google hasn't really performed in the last couple of years. You know,
Yeah, it is a baseline kind of like self-standard technology thing that anyone who can have access to and benefit. I agree.
and it's not just Android. I mean, technically, it works on any platform. If you use a Windows 10 mobile device, you can use this technically.
All two
Jeff
people.
Broussard, just his giant ears perked up. But to that point, though, I think you're talking about the altruism, and it's you can't just say it's purely altruistic or purely like cynical or conniving, because the way that the ecosystem is set up is that any one decision of any significant size is going to have multiple effects where, okay, this is great for users, it's bad for Android manufacturers with their own apps, it's good for carriers, but then bad for users because the carriers get more stuff to hurt users. And then it's like the interweaving threads of who benefits and who doesn't from this is fairly complex, because it's a really complex relationship between Google and Android and the OEMs and the carriers.
Pat, which messaging app do you use most?
I primarily use. I never text people. That's a thing that I rarely do. I primarily use Facebook Messenger and Hangouts. Those are the two that I use. And I used to use WhatsApp, but not so much anymore. For me, I find people gravitate to the messaging apps that their friends are on for the most part. When you're not talking about like stock text apps and stuff like that. But
say you didn't know where that friend was, you'd probably default to Facebook Messenger, right?
Yeah, I would default to Facebook Messenger.
See, that's
100%.
That's RCS's biggest problem, is that people will now think about opening up a separate app before opening up a texting app.
That's true. I never thought about that.
And that is going to be its biggest roadblock, is by the time this proliferates to every carrier across the world with an LTE network,
That's interesting.
it's going to be 2025 or whatever, and people will have chips embedded in their brains and just think about who they want to send a WhatsApp message to, and they won't have to worry about it. So, yeah, I mean, this is a few years too late, and it's a good thing. But Doug was right. It's not purely altruistic, and Google obviously has a business interest in controlling some of the pipe, if not all of it.
It's funny, I'm just going through my, like, just how many people I use on iMessage, which is like one of the chats I significantly use, but I never actually pay attention if they're part of the brood, or if they're sending me a text.
I
don't even think.
And also, like,
I don't even know the last time I sent a text to someone. I'm trying, like, it probably would have been weeks
so
ago.
even your like friends and family and stuff.
I talked to my mom on Facebook Messenger. I talked to
I guess I do too.
I talked to Tassia on Google Hangouts.
Tassie's his cat.
Yeah, my cat Tassia. Tassia's my girlfriend, not my cat. should clarify that. I just never text people. I don't know when that changed. But I just, like, everyone is in some sort of app, and that's how I communicate with people now.
And you know them by the app that you're most likely to hit them with?
Yeah.
Communication with?
Yeah, pretty much.
For me, like, the biggest sticking point to iMessage is that it also works on the computer, right? Like, there are ways to get that.
That is useful.
You know,
like, really
on Android,
useful.
you do something like AirDroid, but just the fact that you can, when I'm working, that I can type off a message on the
Yeah,
computer.
actually, that's a good point. I think most of the messages that I send through iMessage are from my laptop.
So, but speaking of pipes, a new content pipe opened up this week.
All the pipes.
Do you want to take us through Amazon Prime?
Yeah. So Amazon Prime has now launched in Canada, to much criticism from a lot of people that have signed up for it. It's included for free with the standard Prime subscription, which is $79. So for free, you already have to pay the $79 to get in. So it's sort of an added value to that. And a lot of people dislike it immensely. And I think one thing that a lot of people are forgetting is the dumpster fire that Netflix was when it first launched in Canada. There is not a lot of great content on it. There's a lot of B movies. Netflix originals weren't even a thing back then. So, like, when I go back and I read about Netflix and I think about what it was like when it launched, I see a lot of comparisons between the two. They're very similar. The one thing too is that we've sort of realized, and I've been researching it, is that it's possible that we might not get new seasons of Prime originals.
Really?
Yeah, there's certain shows there's certain shows where we only have the first season. I reached out to Amazon, and it seems like we're only going to get the first season of some of them.
So
I'm still trying to
are
figure
those
it
because
out.
of legacy licensing agreements where
No-
they've already promised them to?
No
like-
idea why. I think that it has something to do with the Show Me agreement. I'm doing some research into it, trying to figure it out. But it looks like there's certain shows that we won't get second and third seasons of, and it will be exclusively just the first season in Canada.
Why?
Don't know.
Well, I mean, so something is better than nothing, I guess. But like I looked on it, and there's only the first 2 seasons of Community, something like that. And you're thinking, okay, so a lot of the content owners would offer the first season of something at a much discounted rate just to get it on a service and then entice people to sign up. And then you have this expectation that you'll get subsequent seasons. It could just be that it's probably a licensing issue. I mean, realistically,
No, it's definitely licensing related. I guess the ones that I'm more pointing to are Amazon's originals, which you would expect would
Yeah, but
automatically be on the
if they had already
service.
signed deals for Canada for exclusivity, like are those shows, were they somewhere else?
they were on Show Me.
Yeah, they're on Show Me. So I don't know if it has something to do with the Show Me contract with the earlier seasons has expired.
Yeah, that might not
and
have
later
lapsed
seasons
or-
has not lapsed yet. That's what it looks like.
I
But I don't
wonder-
know yet.
I guess there's some lawyer somewhere being like, I wish I would have put in if Rogers happens to cancel Show Me way sooner than anyone thinks,
Yeah.
we get these shows back.
Like I'm trying to remember the specific shows. So like we might not get the second season of Man in the High Castle. I think only the first season of Transparent is on there, even though the second season is available in every other region,
That's highly unfortunate.
which is really weird. And I don't think anyone's realized that yet because people are just happy that the service finally launched. I don't know if Amazon Prime's going to grow into like a really real valid Netflix competitor, but for someone who's a cord cutter, I think it's great that there's another option out there, especially with Show Me gone.
But I mean, if it doesn't grow into a valid Netflix competitor, isn't that a failure in kind of Amazon's eyes? Like Jeff Bezos doesn't strike me as someone who goes in to win.
But this
right?
also isn't a standalone thing, right?
Yeah.
Like this is an added value to Prime, so it depends, I guess, on how you look at the service.
Yeah, if it's just enough to get people to have more
Yeah.
Prime things. But also, do you feel like this happened sooner than it might have because Show Me died?
So
Like there was an opportunity there.
a lot of people reached out to me about that, but like you have to remember too that it wasn't just a Canadian launch. It launched in 200
global.
different regions, right? So I don't think Canada is, and I'd like to think that Canada is important enough to change a global launch, but probably
No,
not.
but-
There's no way.
I think it's much more likely that Show Me ended at that point because of this launch.
Yes.
Because Amazon gave them the heads up that we're launching worldwide on December whatever. Is it in your best interest to maintain your service? They probably reached out a year ago and said this. So, that's something to keep in mind.
What is in their best interest at this time is I'm super up for debate, but I could totally see them, given their initial investment and I think the high level changes that have been happening at Rogers, that I could see that being maybe a tipping point where they're like, we're not going to go to bat against this.
I think
Shaw was bleeding money too.
Yeah.
They were both bleeding money from Show Me.
I think Daniel's right too, because content licensing agreements are typically 2 years long, and when the deal for the Amazon originals on Show Me was first signed, that was 2 years ago. So it's probably a matter of timing. Like the renewal is coming up, so they're going to ditch the service. So why would they bother renewing it? So it's like a variety of factors, I guess, working together.
Yeah. Well, so then as a secondary thing, how far do you think that this will be pushed as a service in these regions?
I mean, it's going to be interesting because it depends on how you look at Amazon Prime. The way that I've been looking at it is an added free bonus to someone who already subscribes to Prime.
2-day delivery.
Yeah,
That's why I'm here.
that's why you 2-day delivered yourself to the office today.
Yes, I did. To make sure I was on time on the podcast.
Same day delivery on Sundays.
Friday to Monday, yeah.
Yeah.
So it depends on how you look at it. Like if like Igor was saying, is it a failure if people view it as a standalone service and it doesn't have a ton of great content on it? I don't know. I think we need to give it a few months and see what starts hitting it, see if they start signing exclusive deals. Because I think that's what brings people to platforms is exclusive content that you can't get anywhere, like quality stuff that you want to watch. Like I know, for example, my parents subscribed to Netflix to be able to watch the originals, like Orange is the New Black and whatever the new show between is.
Crushed the end of Dirk Gently last night. It was great.
I got to watch that.
It's good.
You convinced me.
Douglas, as someone who creates Canadian content,
Yeah, I do.
check out the CanCon podcast on BetaKit.com.
Come at me, YouTube commenters.
How do you see the death of Show Me and now the birth of Amazon Prime?
I'm pretty bearish on the whole consumption experience in 2016 and 2017 anyways, because it's this idea that technology is going to make things easier, but the business requirements we've been talking about, whether it's like chat messaging or watching TV shows, make it so that it is as fractured as possible. I think if you view Amazon service as just a value add to their like dope pro delivery thing, like I'm a core Amazon purchaser and now I get to watch some TV shows and they have some original content, then that's fine. It's ridiculously cheap. I worry about the number of like subscription services that you have to sign up to replicate just a TV, like a getting the content that you want kind of experience.
That's true.
And it's disappointing that right now the stuff that Amazon makes itself isn't available here. But I also know I completely agree with Patrick that it's entirely early days, and Amazon's not going to pull out.
No.
Rogers and Fido did with Show Me, so it's gonna get better.
Yeah.
What that means for Crave and Netflix, like
Crave's been doing like a crazy marketing push leading up to this.
The question for you, Daniel, I guess, what does this mean for Crave? What does this mean for Bell? Like, it is in a sense kind of the elephant in the room.
Well, I think Crave is now a bit safer for a few more months. We're seeing things like Letterkenny being pushed as reasons to sign up for the service. Increasingly, you're getting press releases about original content coming to Crave, and that's important because eventually those licenses will expire. My wife and I were watching West Wing last week, and we were well into season 2, loving every moment of it, and then we turned on the television the next day and it disappeared. It just went. So, these are the kinds of things that if you don't own the content, you can look forward to things just disappearing. And we're used to that with Netflix, but the din is softer these days because you have an expectation that Orange is the New Black isn't going to disappear overnight because Netflix owns it.
The premier shows you're going to are ones that they're either purely creating that you can only find on Netflix, or like this is the Dirk Gently scenario, or The Crown are ones where they're working with local TV providers.
Right.
So they're sponsoring the development of that. But then they have the rights for everywhere else. So Dirk Gently was a BBC America show. So in the US, you can only watch it. You could only watch it via BBC America, and they put up like the first episode on YouTube even to kind of push BBC America, which is super annoying as a Canadian because it's like, I'll go to YouTube and watch the first episode. I can't get access. Thank you, Region Lock. But then 3 months later, because Netflix co-owns the rights, that's everywhere in the world, including Canada. So I was able to just do my Netflix thing and burn through it in 3 nights. And I think that's the best strategy for Netflix. Can't produce all of the shows by itself, but creating relationships with content producers where they can enable their individual channels to have some uplift, and then suck that to the global audience, making those shows overall more popular is a great strategy. And I think Crave can somewhat do that with Canadian content.
The more I think about it, like I still hold a Netflix subscription specifically for the originals. It's not the other content. I have other platforms that I can access most of the shows that Netflix has on it, but I stick around for the originals. That's why.
I mean, and you also, they're getting a lot more, they're getting a lot more interesting in their advertising. So you see things like the OA. I don't know if you saw the teaser for this new thriller.
Yep.
That they're pushing.
Yeah.
It was nobody knows anything about it, right? But you get these viral campaigns months in advance. You have things like the Gilmore Girls reunion that, they started teasing like 8 months ago.
all over the place.
What are you? No.
Well, I mean,
But then there's also like
That's a whole nother podcast.
there's also like 5 or 10 shows that they've launched as an original that you've never heard of.
Yep.
That you're like, oh wow, I didn't even know that Netflix was making
That's so
this. It's
true.
just there one day.
Right.
But they're also the ones that you don't like necessarily go to or trust because you're like, oh, this was the Netflix show that they weren't pushing, which is kind of lame and weird. But
well, like Black Mirror is an example of that. It's the season that they picked up Black Mirror and they did I guess it's the 3rd season, and that was kind of under the radar. I didn't see any advertising about it, and it wasn't like prominently placed for me, anyways. In
I
my
think it
Netflix
happened.
feed.
I think, but also there's a thing where I think the audience for that was probably primarily UK first with some bleed over.
What was the
into-
UK show,
Yeah.
right?
So that's where like the power of Netflix, like Netflix and Amazon are the only 2 companies with kind of like global feet on the ground. So the scaling effects of that means, before that used to mean, oh, for Canadian Netflix it means we get all the cool British and Australian shows.
Yeah, that's true.
But now it means that there's content being created in those markets that everyone gets to see, but they're raised up to that level. I think everyone should watch Dirk Gently. I think it's really interesting. I think The Crown was really smart, just being like, let's just target all the Commonwealth countries.
It's a good
and make
show,
a drama. Yeah, very well produced. Lithgow going full Lithgow.
Oh yeah.
I think it's also worth noting that Amazon and Netflix are not the only 2 players. I mean, Apple is coming out with its own unique programming in the next few months. It's got iTunes, which everybody despises, but it's a huge distribution network.
Yeah.
And Facebook. Think about this. A pilot of a show auto playing in your feed. You
But
sit-
Facebook isn't a media company.
So, these are the kinds of things that over the next couple of years you can definitely expect. And Facebook has, I think, the biggest chance of creating a huge market for original video. I mean, they already do. They have billions of hours of terrible Facebook Live uploaded every day.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I just don't want that in any way, shape, or form.
Right. But it's coming, and you can believe that they're going to push it hard. And that's another way of making a ton of money. I mean, think about the fact that they may offer a few original shows for free if you see a few pre-rolls. I mean, it's YouTube essentially, and don't forget YouTube. YouTube originals exist. They're not great, but PewDiePie is basically a one-man monster channel right now, and he's threatening to leave.
There's YouTube Red, which still isn't available here.
Canada.
As
No,
far as I know.
it's in the US. You go down to the US and your phone starts getting all these notifications to sign up
YouTube
for Red. It's like, damn it.
Would either of you guys? Well, first of all, 2 questions. One, do you currently use iTunes to watch TV or movies? And would you sign up to an iTunes subscription service?
I mean, now that Netflix you can do offline, I probably wouldn't use it much, but I rent movies for plane flights.
Yeah, I've never ever purchased something in iTunes that's in video ever. Never touch it.
I mean, like purchased rent or purchased?
Either or, never.
Really?
I bought music in iTunes before, but never video content.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause TV is expensive on iTunes.
It is.
But
That's a lot of money
as a
to buy
movie rental
episodes.
service. It's pretty decent.
And I've always seen it as like I'm never gonna watch it again. I don't really need to own it. I would rather pay for a subscription service and use it when I want to watch it, and then you know what I mean.
But then you can sort of understand why a service like Show Me lost so much money, because if you're not willing to pay $40 for a season of a show, you can imagine how much money they're being charged to license that content.
Tons of money.
So
I think it's just the equation. We used to pay $40 for a season on DVD, but the ownership of that was more clear than content disappearing or being tied to a box or living in a tech provider's ecosystem. But there's also TV where you're like, I don't want to pay $45 to watch Family Guy.
That's my thing with iTunes. I just don't.
There's
I don't wanna-
Prestige TV that you own the DVD. There's The West Wing, of which I still have
I
the
can see
DVDs.
that.
And my girlfriend's like, can we throw them out? I'm like, no, because we saw what happened. We saw what happened on the Netflix. We need to own the DVDs. But for most of the TV you just want to watch. You don't want to be paying $6 an episode, or I guess $3 an episode, or things like that.
So Daniel, how are you doing on time? Do you have to be anywhere?
I'm good.
Okay. So if you've been watching the video, you may have noticed that Dan is double fisting 2 different phones.
Oh God.
One is a V20 that happens to be on Freedom Mobile. If you've been following this kind of saga, as one might say, the Freedom Mobile LTE network was supposed to launch, what was it, 2 weeks ago now? It soft launch, I guess, is the kindest term that we can use. But now it's finally fully launched. And,
Well,
Pat and I have, or sorry, you wanted to say something.
No, it didn't soft launch. It hard failed. I mean, you can't launch a product
It's a good way
and
to
tell people
describe
that every.
Well,
I
why
said
do you
kind.
put the teddy bear in charge of a company? I don't get that. Why is the teddy bear running the company?
Yeah. So we've all, Pat and I have been on podcasts where we've spoken about Freedom Mobile at length, but we kind of, now that you're back, we wanted to have a bit of your insight and thoughts on the rebranding, the saga that has been Freedom Mobile. So
The bear. Do you like the bear?
Yeah, let's start
what I
with
wanna
the
know.
bear. Do you
That's
like the
burning
bear?
question.
How do you like the bear?
Douglas hates the bear here. He
Douglas-
said that he hated it.
The commercials are terrible. The commercials are absolutely terrible. I understand the need to change the way and like change the narrative, change the brand, change the experience, but there's nothing about what we've seen that makes it compelling. Like it's just it's so bad. It's so bad.
Yeah.
And then when followed up with the launch issues, it's just we talked about it before. It's the total wrong foot.
The bear is bad. The bear is problematic, as is something happening with our headphones. I think Freedom Mobile is a good name. They needed to get away from Wind, considering it's a legacy brand that was associated with Orascom and then VimpelCom, and is still a brand across the world. So if Shaw really wanted to make a go at it, it couldn't maintain Wind, obviously, and they were paying licensing for that. The colors are the same, so it's recognizable to some extent, especially now that Mobilicity's gone. There's really nobody else to talk about. This was inevitable. The fact that there were only going to be a couple devices available at launch. I think this is the only way that they could do it. The awkward thing, though, is that because they weren't able to get any band 66 spectrum or AWS-3 spectrum in Eastern Ontario, they're using their legacy network there, which means any LTE phone that will work on any carrier in Canada will work on its LTE network in Eastern Canada. But its most important markets, for Vancouver and Toronto, you need to buy a $700 phone or a piece of crap Grand X4 from
Yeah, the
CTE.
Grand X4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Crazy.
that sucks, because there's really no way right now to take advantage of the network, but they had to start somewhere. Band 66 was only solidified in like June of this year. So when you think about how long it took, that's a very quick turnaround from standardizing to actual phones in hand that work with it. So eventually every phone will support band 66, just like a few years ago the iPhone didn't support band 7 and everybody was upset, and even some phones only supported band 4 and didn't support anything on 700. So there are we don't remember because everything works now, but there were many years where you had to buy a phone that would only work on Rogers, but it wouldn't work on T-Mobile, or vice versa. And we're now in a situation where Qualcomm can create a phone chip, modem chip with compatibility with almost every network in the entire world.
Yeah, the Roam Like Home and similar services didn't emerge from nothing at this point in time just because people wanted it. There was like a technical groundwork that had to be laid.
Do you see the iPhone 7S or 8, whatever it ends up being called? Is that going to be band 66 compatible?
Yeah, every phone will be band 66 compatible. It's basically right next to current AWS 1. So all the companies have to do is, or basically all Qualcomm has done is just extended compatibility with AWS to support AWS 3. And that has combined is band 66. So every phone will eventually support it. It's not going to be a problem. You will be able to take for granted that pretty much every phone sold in 2017 will support band 66.
How's the experience so far? On the
It's
network?
fast. I got up to 70 megabits down this morning in this office and about 35 megabits up compared to Wind 3G. That's 10 times faster,
Wow.
at least.
Approximately, yeah, I think so.
More?
Well, you also got a signal, which is like
Yeah, well, that's true. I got a signal. I've been getting pretty strong LTE signal. I mean, they're still tweaking it. I drop LTE all the time, but it's early days. And what was really fun was that I got a notification that I had an update to my V20 yesterday. I updated it, and LTE just turned on. It was fantastic. And there was nothing to do. And then I got a text later in the day saying, hey, welcome to our LTE network. Try it out. Let us know what you think. And then they sent me another text saying, you haven't paid your bill yet.
Passive aggressive.
It's the best kind of text.
So, it's good. And I think when I'm able to kind of travel to the outskirts of Toronto, I'd like to see where the LTE network ends, because they've made some grand claims about how it's going to be strong up until sort of the Mississauga, Pickering, Thornhill, area. And I wonder whether that's true right now. This is very kind of inside baseball Toronto stuff. Sorry if you're listening in like Winnipeg.
So on that note, our wonderful editor / engineer / this podcast would not exist without her is gesturing at me to finish up our pod. So
I think she just wants to go get her like cold medicine because she's dying of the plague in the corner.
So as is a new tradition on the SyrupCast, we have shout outs. If you've been listening, Dan, I'm sure you've heard them. So as the guest of honor, would you like to start our shout outs?
Sure. Yeah. I would like to shout you, Igor. You have done a fantastic job hosting this. I think, the SyrupCast disappeared for a while, rightfully so, I think. And you guys brought it back. I love the new setup. I think, the new hosts, I love listening to Jess and Rose and Pat and everybody on the show each week. And I love that you've brought video, considering that we have a very, very strong contingent of people who tell us every week that the Android Central podcast needs video and that they won't listen to it until we bring video back. I respect the fact that you do it, and you've done a great job with it. So shout out to you, Igor. Well done.
Thank you. And where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at JourneyDan on Twitter and Instagram. My dog's Instagram is zadie.the.dane.
Oh, I gotta follow that.
Please follow us. And my work is found often on Android Central and iMore.
Cool. Pat, your shout?
My shout out goes to Nintendo for releasing Super Mario Run late. Right before I had an appointment. I wrote up a post the night before, though, so it was ready to go, thankfully. But yeah.
You and every other publication.
Pretty much, yeah. I know that for a fact. I've been playing it quite a bit over the last couple of days. I can't beat Daryl. Can't beat his score, but I'm working on that.
Daryl Etherington of TechCrunch fame.
Yeah, it's a good game. It's an interesting... I have a lot that I want to write about it in the next couple days. It's an interesting take on Mario, and I haven't decided yet if it's a successful translation of, I guess, the core mechanics of that game. But it's cool to see Nintendo modernize its business practices and finally move to mobile in a serious way. Like, I know Miitomo came out and there's other games coming out in the future, but I think it's interesting. I have a lot to say about it eventually.
And you'll find those hot takes on MobileSyrup.com. You, Doug?
Shout out Jeff Broussard, OG. Shout out the Mobile Syrup SyrupCast subjective review score. Shout out Jane, gone but not forgotten. Probably stewing in her own whiskey right now. Shout out Daniel Sweater. Shout out.
I think you're setting a record for shout outs.
Yeah.
I can shout out as much as I want. I started this thing. Shout out the podcast, which continues to this day and lives on and grows and gets more mics and technology, and a podcast producer and all these things.
Yeah, and your sweater, I think you wore that the first SyrupCast we did. So
possibly, I think I just got it. Yeah.
My shout out goes to your colleague Daniel Rubino from Windows Central. He put Windows 10 on a Mac, and it was interesting, or on the new MacBook, and it was.
What?
Anyway, and Daniel Rubino.
He loves to troll.
That's awesome.
He's just like a really smart and interesting guy to follow on Twitter and talk to in person. So say hi to me.
I will.
Say hi to him.
It's often hard to get him to focus on anything but what he's doing in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
But I will let him know that you say hi.
All right. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this is just the start of many more great things. And we'll hopefully see you in the next 100.
Do it for the pod.
Peace out.
Bye.